Okay, hi everyone. It is 12 o'clock, so we will get started. Thank you for joining us today. This is a program that's part of the FACE series, which stands for Faculty and Careers Exchange. This is a webinar series that joins folks from the NYU SPS Wasserman Center along with faculty here at NYU to talk about topics that are at the intersection of industry and career development. And so some of our past topics have included workplace competencies such as critical thinking and problem solving, oral and written communication. And today we're going to be focusing on managing change and conflict in the workplace. For those of you who have seen our career development life cycle, it is comprised of a few different phases, starting with self-assessment, and then market assessment, and then explore and decide, and then action, and then manage. And at the heart of it is relationship building. And so the topic that we are covering today falls within the manage piece. A lot of the work that students tend to think of with relation to career centers are basically a lot of the things that happen before you get the job, right? Things like, well, how do I know what kind of jobs or careers I'm interested in? Or what does that industry look like? How do I prepare a resume and a cover letter that really speaks to making me, to conveying that I'm a fit for that role? And a lot of the times we don't think about, well, okay, now that I'm in the role, how do I continue to be successful in that role? For some of us, we may currently be in roles, and you might be thinking about this piece, and maybe that's what's brought you here today, where there may be times where there will be change that you'll have to manage and conflict that you'll have to face in the workplace. But luckily, we've got a great faculty member to join us today who is an expert in this topic and who will lead our discussion on this. And so before I turn her mic on, let me just tell you a little bit about our speaker today. So Zulika Cuevas is an HR professional, and her experience includes diversity and inclusion, leadership development, mentorship development, succession management, and professional development initiatives. She comes to us with over 25 years of corporate, nonprofit, and educational experiences in training, talent and organizational development, communication, and leadership development consulting. Zulika earned her MBA from Adelphi and her BBA from PACE. She's also a certified ATD master trainer and certified coach. And Zulika is currently an adjunct professor here at SPS, and she teaches in the Division of Programs and Business in the Management and Technology unit. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Zulika, and I'm going to unmute her mic right now. Hi, Zulika.
Hello, Edwin. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. What a wonderful introduction. I thank you so much for that.
Sure.
And welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I think you'll find this session to be very informational. You can see right before you some of the things that we're going to talk about. One of many, we're going to start with some myths. We're going to look at some negative behaviors and ingredients to what causes the conflict. We're going to take a look at those negative effects and psychological symptoms on how we feel when we're caught in that situation. And then following that, we'll talk about some remedies, some solutions, and things that we can do to manage the conflict and change, and talk about the conversation besides that. So before we move on to our next slide, I do want to just tell a slight little story. As Edwin so eloquently mentioned, I am an organizational communication and business professor, and I have many years of business experience. So my professional life really centers on training the workplace on this thing called conflict management. In order for you to really, truly wrap your head around the gravity of this situation, there is something important you need to know about me. Would you guys like to hear what it is? Well, I'm going to tell you. I love frosted flakes. Edward, you could turn the slide. Yes, I do. I love Frosted Flakes, as you can see. So after a long day of work, all I wanted to do was to relax at home with my favorite bowl of cereal. Not much, not asking for much. So you can imagine how I felt when I got home and saw my lovely husband, Nelson, on the couch, finishing the last bowl of cereal. And he didn't even have the decency to use milk. So really, without thinking, I took out the Pop-Tarts, which is his favorite, mind you, and ate all of it. Yes, I did. And I don't even like Pop-Tarts. So I bring this up to say this is definitely an example of how not to handle conflict. Edwin, you can take it to the next slide. Thank you. So let's get right into it and talk about some myths that are out there. The first one being that conflict is only at work. That's not true. As you heard, it's even at home. It's in our personal life. In fact, it exists all around us. Conflict is dysfunctional in the workplace. Conflict represents a communication breakdown. Well, yes, it can lead to a very toxic, dysfunctional outcome, but that's not always the case, right? When managed correctly, it can lead to like innovation and ideas, different ways of thinking. If, the thing is when you explore it correctly and it's debated properly, new ideas and solutions can truly appear. So it's not always dysfunctional. The other point here, it says, if avoided, conflict will eventually go away. Let me tell you the consequences of that. Good people can walk out the door. Your boss maybe mistakes your avoidance for acquiescence. If you don't say anything, it's equivalent to, okay, let's move forward. Or not stating your true feelings might allow others to state it for you. It might even be a situation where you're looked down upon as shy or just lacking self-confidence. And we know that's not the case. Have you ever been in a long-term relationship? You've heard that saying, sometimes you have to pick and choose your battle. Well, sometimes you need to do what's in the best interest of others. It's really clearly not about winning, but it's about listening to be understood. And we're going to talk more about listening and some of the things you can do to carry on a more effective conversation. But that myth of conflict always results in a winner and a loser, no, it doesn't always. So let's turn the slide. Let's see what else we have to say about that.
And Zuleika, sorry, Zuleika,
yes.
Before we hop onto the truth, just want to jump in with a quick reminder for everyone. We're going to send everyone copies of the slides that Zuleika is covering today, but it would be helpful if everyone typed in their NetID in the group chat box. So we have everyone's email addresses to be able to send those out. So please type in your NetIDs now into the group chat. And then also, we will be saving time at the end for questions. However, if there are questions that come up as Zuleika is speaking, we'll try to address them in real time if it's appropriate, but otherwise please continue to pay attention and think of your questions, type them in the chat box, but if not, we'll save time at the end for questions. All right, Zuleika, back to you.
No problem, thank you, Edwin. All right, so let's talk about some truths. Well, conflict can help build relationships. Yes, they can. Do have those conversations, right? Don't avoid them. Even if it's over Frosted Flakes, right? Conflict is an opportunity to either repair or to strengthen valuable relationships. Or maybe it can identify or even remove the bad ones with minimal damage, and done the right way can be very effective. And it can even be a motivator for change. So that's a truth. Have you ever said something to somebody in the heat of the moment that you immediately knew was a mistake, this is called an amygdala hijack. Anybody ever heard of it? It's from that psychologist, Daniel Coleman. I believe he wrote the book, Emotional Intelligence, on why it can matter more than having an IQ. And it can take you from being rational to irrational in the blink of an eye. These responses are really, truly rooted in fear, anxiety, aggression, anger, and as the slide states, it's that fight or flight situation. It's like being in a deer. It's being a deer in the headlight. And this really predominantly is due to your past experiences. So when you're caught in the moment, this is how one can handle it, right? So definitely be aware of that. And then don't stop talking until a solution's reached. I'm telling you, it is the key. And when you open up those channels, then good things can happen. Next, Edwin, thank you. All right, so now let's talk about behaviors in the workplace or within a school situation that unfortunately we all can relate to. I call this one the firecracker, AKA bully. These people, they blow up suddenly out of anger, then they apologize, then they do it again. It's like a cycle that goes over and over again. And truly the end result is what they're trying to do is to control you by being intimidating, harassing, humiliating others. These people pose a threat of emotional and serious harm, so don't do that. Then we've heard about the cold shoulder, right? Most people know about this one. It's the exclusion of someone from social interactions, and this really can hurt others. And I've seen this played out time and time again, where one or two people really take pride in not communicating with each other. And then next, we've heard about the backstabber, right? Where, you've heard of this when colleagues turn against each other. And this is so damaging and can have such a bad impact on morale, team effectiveness. You felt it. The next slide is about I call this one the social zinger. These people throw verbal darts in front of others. And then the next phrase is about trivial fights. They really agonize over the little things. Maybe they're called the nagger. And they really seldom get to the real issues, right? And then lastly, having the last word. We've seen it time and time again. They must have the last remark. So let's just talk about the causes or the ingredients. But before that, I just wanted to mention that I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and I went to an all-girl Catholic school. And the things that I really appreciated about my school back in the day was its diversity, or I must mention its lack of diversity. And I say this only to bring to you that no one, I really felt like no one truly looked like me. They certainly didn't have, my name is very extensive and sometimes hard to pronounce. I get that. And on top of that, my family comes from Central America, and I had a very slight accent growing up. So not only did I look different, I sounded different, and this made it tough for me growing. It really did make it tough for me. So diversity, people naturally will, other people will think differently. There's that cultural mix. Maybe, certain people only want to be around people that sound like them or look like them. When I started working at several jobs, I became obsessed with finding ways to get accepted into the mix. I eventually became very popular, and I guess you could say I was a people pleaser, and this really came at a big price. I was so afraid to jeopardize all my relationships, and this led to me agreeing with others when really maybe at certain points I should have disagreed. and avoiding confrontation at all costs. So, diversity can play a big factor in that ingredient of causing conflict. Also, number two, having unclarified roles. Sometimes when our job duties or roles or responsibilities can get confusing, and it sort of comes together and blends in with somebody else's roles and responsibilities. That can lead to a lot of frustration. And then lastly, ignoring needs. Now, I presented a previous seminar, and it was called Developing an Engaged Workforce. And we talked about a famous psychologist. His name was Abraham Maslow, and some of you might recognize his name. And he talked about the hierarchy of 5 basic needs. Now, according to Maslow, if I'm worried about security, if I'm worried about belonging, if I'm worried about feeling valued, then maybe I won't be so engaged or happy. Or maybe I won't have this confidence about myself to want to create an environment that's stress-free. So the point of it all is really the lack of achieving these needs can cause conflict in the situation. Okay, and then just a couple more things. You ever get that email, where someone sends you an email and the font is all in caps? Or have you ever gotten that email where the font is all in red? I was working at a nonprofit, and I was really, they hired me to be the vice president at a nonprofit organization. And I had about 2 direct reports that reported up to me. And what happened there is, as a newbie at that time, I sent an email and it had all caps. Well, do you know that the complaint went all the way up to the CEO? And it was not my intention to disrespect my direct report or to talk down, but that use of all caps in an email was definitely something that she found to be very disrespectful. So you have to be very careful about the emails and how you communicate. Even the communication from manager to peer or direct report, if done in a demeaning way, can have long-term impact. The other one is too much work. This can cause stress and anxiety when work needs to get done and you don't have enough resources to tackle it. Also, selective hearing, right? Which is sometimes based on our own past experiences. Someone starts speaking and automatically you sort of, pick and choose what you're going to highlight or make a rash judgment. All of these things make noise and clouds the conversation. We hear what we want to hear when we want to hear it, right? We listen with the intention to speak, and we don't listen with the intention to be understood. So we've got to be very careful with that. And then I would, it's very important that I address, I'm not going to spend too long on this slide, but when you add the mix of these generations into the workplace, right, we get confusion, right? So will our baby boomers understand our millennials? Will our millennials understand our Gen Xers? And now then you're even adding Gen Z to the mix, which I don't even have included here, right? And it just more and more is becoming a characteristic that every one of us, we all need to understand the next person. So I bring this up because I wanted you to realize that this is something that we all must learn to understand, appreciate, and deal with. So next, let's just talk about some effects of the workplace that really is the end result, right? Companies now, and you might not see this, but they have to deal with a lot of long-term effects that come with workplace conflict, right? 41% of organizations are seeing higher absenteeism, 50% higher in turnover, termination, emotional stress, complaints. I have it is amazing to me because I'm in human resources, and the number of lawsuits that I have seen as a direct result of workplace conflict is definitely on the rise. This can cost companies, and this is according to a Gallup research poll that was done back in 2017, between $483 to $605 billion in costs from workplace conflict and disengaged employees. Okay, and so what I wanted to do on the next slide really quickly was to address the impact that it has on employees within companies. And what I did was I segmented it based on passive behaviors. So while this person isn't outwardly coming out and showing you their disengagement, it's all in the writing of the emails. It's all in withholding information or not returning messages, or there's a delay in giving required support. On the next slide, I go on to address aggressive behaviors. Now, these are much well out there, and you can see it, right? Getting others to take sides. You can see the shouting, the threatening, undermining another's reputation. So these are just some aggressive behaviors. And then lastly, when there's conflict in the workplace, we feel it. We definitely have these symptoms: the sweaty palms, the nervousness, closed body posture, tense facial expressions, tears, stress. I know I have. And it really doesn't put us in a good place. We don't feel it, and then you know how anxiety and stress will have an impact on the body, physically and mentally. So, Edwin, if you could go back to the slide where I talked, yes, where we stress generations. And I just wanted to very briefly talk about a minor conflict that I myself had in the workplace. Early this year, I found myself in a very heated discussion with another coworker. And I remember this situation like it was yesterday. This coworker was very furious. I could actually not only hear her rage, but I could see it in her eyes. I felt like my own sudden rush of emotions, and I myself too felt like I was a deer in headlights. The way I reasoned it to myself, though, at the time, this is some of the things that I said to myself. I said I could either run away, I could fight back, which I would never do that in a workplace, or I would just take her comments, take her bullying, right? But instead of falling victim to these fight, flight, fear impulses, I chose to use compassionate curiosity. By really focusing on her emotional needs and getting to the heart of what she was going through questioning. Pretty much what I said was something like, listen, I can tell you're upset about something. What are your biggest concerns? Where is that emotion coming from? What can I do to help you? And as I started to ask a lot of her questions, I noticed she started to calm down. And no joke, by the end of the conversation, we were laughing and joking with each other. And at the end of the conversation, she did give me everything I needed. So you could start off a conversation like this. Well, Gen Z or millennial, let me tell you how things work around here. What's your problem? Is there a curiosity here? Yes. Was the statement compassionate? I don't think so. Or maybe we start the conversation like this. I saw at the meeting that you were slightly silent and quiet, and the kind of impact that had on the rest of the team was it had a behavior of really truly being disengaged. Could you explain to me what caused that situation? Is there anything I can help you? Is there something on your mind? Was it something that was, and so when we look at having compassionate curiosity, we could say, was it on my part? Was I being curious? Yes. And was I being a little bit compassionate? Yes. Passionate curiosity really does factor or foster a genuine understanding of not making assumptions, especially when we're dealing with many generations falling into the mix, which creates a lot of misunderstandings and confusion. But what we need to do is offer empathy and respect. And what I've found in the past, when we approach these conversations in a way that allows us to ask more questions based on listening, based on strategic questioning, then that leads us to being more effective and bringing that person to a point where it's not confrontational. I consider this to be the key in being the lion tamer. And I'll explain what I mean by being the lion tamer a little later. So effective conflict management is really critical today. It's an effective way of dealing with negotiation and persuasion. And you don't think about it, but it is an effective way of professionally getting the person to the point of where you need them to be through motivation. Okay, Edwin, thank you very much. We're going to go back to, five managing conflict styles. Before we begin, there is a questionnaire that I do have that I believe Edwin will submit to all of you, and you can take this questionnaire to figure out what's your conflict style. So right now, what we're going to do is go through the first one, and it talks about competition. It's really about, is your style one-sided? Always catering to, you always want the person to come to your way of making a decision, right? But it's okay. You can use this competition conflict style in emergency situations when you need a quick decision. When you're implementing an unpopular change, but change needs to happen, sometimes you need it. When other methods fail, you've exhausted all other methods. Or sometimes maybe you're engaging in a long-term contract. Yes, it is one-sided, but sometimes it is needed depending on those situations. The other managing conflict style is one on accommodation. And it really is allowing the other side to win. And I don't kind of like that word, but we are empowering others to make a decision. This is okay when you want to use it to preserve the relationship versus arguing down about the issue. Or let's say you're in a retail environment and you know how they say the customer is always right? Well, maybe you gave them a product that wasn't the best or it's not what they intended. Okay, accommodation is key. Maybe the other person at hand is more of the expert or is more credible and has X number of years of experience. Then I think it's well justified. The problem is when you accommodate for the wrong reason, and we've seen this, right? Groupthink, if you guys understand what that is, it's when the group goes along for the sake of just going along with things. And this is definitely not what you want to have happen, because it just means that there's no sharing of opinions. We are just going along with the flow because we don't want to rock the boat. So we don't want to be putting ourselves in that situation. And then the next managing style is called avoidance. Decision to not handle. It's really about not making a decision at all. In the case of the bully, sometimes we need to use it in situations. Maybe there's a conflict and we need to involve leadership in the situation. Sometimes it's a minor issue, maybe more time is required. Or maybe we need to cool off. I've had a situation where, and I will call her a bully, she stood outside of my office and started ranting and raving and just so furious. And I think sometimes in this situation, we need to cool off. We need to avoid in order not to escalate the situation. The problem is, the bully itself is the problem. So you definitely don't want to be involved in that situation. The next complex style is compromise, and this is about a win on both sides. If that makes sense, I give, you give, but are we truly meeting? Are we truly ever really satisfying each other if I'm giving and you're giving, but I'm not giving totally, and neither are you? We're sort of meeting each other in the middle. And it's okay. We can use this when we really want to reach agreement and have an equal footing of power, when we're trying to reach a common ground, or we're trying to temporarily settle on an issue. But the question is, are both sides ever really satisfied? And then I believe the next complex style is collaboration, and most of us have seen this. This is really through team input. It's about working together on a win, not giving up anything truly, because the aim here is to build a relationship. Maybe we're trying to be creative and we're trying to explore solutions. I have here Innovation Berkeley, and I only bring this up is because we have a program at my job where I am collaborating, or the university collaborates with all the other employees or associates in coming up with a creative solution or idea. And then where we're looking for solutions where there might not be much conflict. The problem is this could be very time consuming. It depends. But for the most part, when you put the time into it, it is about asking the key questions and understanding both parties. So in summary, what's the most effective style? Well, the answer is it's not just one size fits all. When you're using it in the right situation, that's what you call situational leadership. And it depends on the situation. That means you can use any one of those 5 conflict styles. It depends on the situation, and you won't be wrong to use it. Experience will tell you, and the more you go through your experiences, you will become familiar with the right way to use the style in the best scenario or situation. But the key here is to empathize or put yourself in another person's shoes in order to better understand the environment. So, speaking of empathy or being aware of the situation, remember we spoke about leading with curiosity and compassion. So let's get back to Nelson, my husband, and my frosted flakes. What does compassionate curiosity look like in his situation? So if I could go back in time, when I saw him eating my box of frosted flakes, maybe I wanted to bring up the conversation and really tell him how I felt and how angry I felt on what he was doing. So maybe I'd want to say something like, yesterday when I saw that you were eating my box of frosted flakes, and as you know, there's not a lot left. Maybe there was something that you could have eaten. Why did you choose to? Was there not enough? Is there something else that you could have perhaps focused on? And maybe next time we buy 2 boxes of frosted flakes, right? So instead of suffering through an ungodly amount of Pop-Tarts to make an ineffective point, maybe I could have done it a little bit better the next time. So the point here, the other person, when I went through and asked my husband about these questions, I came to find out that he was totally unaware of his actions or how his actions impacted me. And that's why it is our responsibility to stand up and say something if we really care about the relationship. And this can be difficult, but if we really truly care, then it can be truly about creating a positive change on the behavior of others. So what I did on the next slide is really talking about, putting some tangible facts into our questions, right? Because it is about asking appropriate questions. And here is utilizing the 3 W's of communication: the who, the what, the who, the what, the where. Who, always communicate with that key person. Don't go through a third party. Don't go around the person, because that's how rumors start, and that's how conflict escalates, right? So you definitely want to go to the key person. The when, discuss the issue within 24 hours. The sooner, the better. Maybe you need a chance to prepare your thoughts. Maybe maybe you cool off, right? And then come back to it, within a decent amount of time, but definitely do try to address the issue within 24 hours. Where? Maybe what you want to do is consider a neutral location, equal footing, never in the hallway, never address the question to the person in the hallway or a place that can be very embarrassing to another person. Next, lead the way. State your intentions upfront, clearly, and the key word here is respectfully, right? Ask questions like, can you help me understand? How do you see things? So these questions allow the other person to calm down. The other person understands that you're not the enemy, but that you're simply trying to understand the situation. Feed encouragement. Put yourself in the other person's shoes. How might they react? Maybe it's a reaction to something I don't see or know. Previously before I talked about the bully, maybe it was something in the morning that happened that I'm not aware of, right? That made this person get to the point of confrontation. And so sometimes, I know it's hard in the moment, but sometimes you really do have to not pinpoint that person and directly feel that that person's out to get you, but it could just be what happened the morning of. And you might just say things like, interesting point, I didn't think about that. Again, all these things are tools that you can use. It's also about the attitude, right? Always have a positive attitude. I have always tried to not be that negative person. No one wants to be a person. You know how you come in the morning and, a lot of us are tired. We get that, and we go for our coffees. And then maybe towards the mid-morning, early afternoon, we start becoming ourselves, right? And I'm not trying to say to purposely put on a face, but what I'm trying to say is just have a positive attitude. And I think it's all mental. So when you have that positive attitude, you're sort of, your physicalness within the body sort of comes out, and it shows to other people. And then I'm coming back to that word. Remember I used that word, the lion tamer? Get the line to work with you to motivate. Use the whip or offer me. Okay, so it's not the whip, right? But what I'm trying to say here is use compassionate curiosity as an incentive to motivate others. Your question shows you care. It promotes empathy. It makes the other person understand that you're trying to understand the situation. And it puts both of you on equal footing. And then lastly, I have sealed the deal, discuss solutions, and ask for commitments. I do want to add a note. It's very important how we provide feedback when it comes to conflict, managing conflict. There is a method that I use. Um, it's called SBI. It stands for Situation, Behavior, and Impact. And when we address others or we're trying to provide that feedback, we want to look at the person's behavior. We want to address the situation that we saw the behavior in. Then we want to address that person's behavior. And then we want to simply address the impact that that person's behavior had. And I think that that allows us to have equal footing and to not be in that confrontational level when we're trying to provide that feedback. We are living at a time where we have forgotten how to talk to each other. There's so much going on, and technology seems to make us more isolated at times rather than connecting us. Of course, today, with everything that's going on, we need that technology, right, folks? But sometimes we do, I would say 100% of the times, we do need that human connection, and we've got to learn from the ground up how to communicate to avoid conflict. Diversity, generational issues seems to lead us to so much miscommunication, misconceptions today, and sometimes that allows us to feel a little bit more isolated. Now, I teach a class on intercultural business communication, and we do have very important conversations because we need to get it out. We need to have an understanding of what's causing us to have not so much the confrontation, but to move from a place of where we used to be to a place of change. So I share this message. It's all about compassionate curiosity. To me, I think it just may be the very best thing we can do to counteract the silos, the animosity, the misunderstandings that's out there. In addition to that, I wanted to address the top 10 things we can do to solidify our conversation. And it starts with the 10. There are 10 ways, in my opinion, to have a better conversation. So I just wanted to jot down what I think are these true secrets to building great relationships. I hope you guys are ready. So the first one is, again, as I stated, we're in the midst of, technology. There's so many things thrown at our footsteps, but try to do your best to don't multitask. Now, I say this because we want you to be present and in the moment when you're one-on-one or in a team meeting or in a group at your organization or in class to connect with others. Tip number 2, don't pontificate. And when I say this, I mean to say, don't state it's important to rely on giving someone your own personal opinions, but really, when someone's in the midst of trying to tell you what they experience, don't add in your own at the moment, because all experiences are different and they really just need you to listen. Tip number 3, compassionate curiosity. Again, use open-ended questions. I think this is the key, and this truly is the secret towards building understanding. Tip number 4, go with the flow. Your thoughts and ideas will come. Let it go. I am the guilty party here when I'm speaking to someone or someone saying something to me and a thought comes into my head. I either interrupt them or I get frustrated because I definitely want to bring this point home. Well, you know what? Just let it go. Focus on the here and now. Tip number 5, if you don't know, say you don't know something, type of thing. And so it's just very important that we are trustworthy. Ask the question. It's okay. You don't have to be the expert for everything and just say you don't know. And especially, tip number 6, don't equate your experience with others. That's very important. Don't repeat yourself. I do that a lot with my son, and I guess it gets so weak after a while. So try not to do that. Tip number 8, stay out of the weeds, lose the details. Now, I say that only because sometimes when you focus too much on the details, today everyone's attention span is not the best. We are spread in so many different directions. So we've got to learn to speak with impact and to give the other person what they need when they need it most. So leave the details to storytelling, then we'll be ready to hear the details. And then tip number 9 is be brief, be intentional. And then lastly, listening. Just listen. Listen with the intent to understand is what creates a better conversation. And when you do that, I've seen from utilizing these tips that the most shyest person will want to communicate because you have opened up not only their souls, but you've allowed them to speak about the very thing they're passionate about. So I hope these tips help. And then I just want to, Edwin, I don't know how I'm doing with time, but I just wanted to leave the group with just a brief summary of what we said, or a brief solution, in that using the 5 management conflict strategies and infusing that with empathy goes a long way. 5 managing conflict strategies, again, should be used. There's no wrong or right way, but it depends on the situation. That truly is the answer. And hopefully with the questionnaire, you yourself can, number 1, see what your most dominant style is, and that will be your first step to being aware of of the style you predominantly use, but understand that the answer is truly utilizing the 5 managing conflict styles when the situation arises. Also, compassionate curiosity, really, it is about, we spoke about the 10 listening tips that I just gave you, and the whole goal of that is it's all in the question answer. It is about improving your relationships on and off work, and by utilizing those listening skills, you can not only be empathetic to the other person, but you can understand through the question and answer and through the conversation, with the notion of just listening to understand. You'll be off on your way to building a more effective and engaged relationship. Or you can take this road. You can do what my husband Nelson did, sneak into the kitchen and eat all the frosted flakes. And as you can see, that doesn't work either. So I really do hope that this helped everyone. And I'm going to run it back to Edwin. Thank you, guys.
Great. Thank you so much, Leka. That was really, really insightful, super comprehensive. It was great to hear your thoughts on, everything from the ingredients of conflict to, the 5 conflict management styles, and even the ways to have effective conversations. I think a big takeaway from me is, when there are conflicts in the workplace, it's mostly miscommunication, right? It's the way that we either misinterpret things or misspeak something, and it all is just kind of cyclical. So one of my takeaways is to sort of give people the benefit of the doubt that no one is really trying to come into the office and be like, how can I be the most malicious person today? I appreciate you mentioning the piece about addressing things, sooner rather than later, and honestly, and even that piece of compassionate curiosity is really, really important. So I'm going to open up the floor to anyone who has a question. in the meantime, I also want to remind everyone that we are going to email the slides as well as the questionnaire that Zuleika had mentioned, so that you can take it, and then it'll also then introduce you to what your preferred conflict management style is. It's helpful because then you just understand yourself a little bit better. During this time, I want to remind everyone that the Wasserman Center continues to be open, and we do continue to serve students. We are offering coaching and drop-ins virtually, so you can sign up for those via Handshake. So while we wait for questions to come in via the chat box, I had some like 2 questions to start us off, so like if we want to go through those. So a lot of what you had mentioned was, you know, conflict resolution between 2 folks, right? At what point would you suggest someone, you know, start to involve their supervisor or loop the supervisor in about maybe something that has happened?
That's a very good question. I would say almost definitely right away. Unless you truly feel that it's not a minor issue, and your best judgment with that. But I just believe that, you know, depends on the situation. But if you feel that it could get out of hand, I just feel that open communication with your supervisor is very important, because, you know, we want to document that if it's something that is lacking resources, or a miscommunication on something, or a process, then we definitely need to have a professional conversation about it.
Great, thank you for that. And then another question I had is, okay, so let's say you do, you know, address the conflict with a coworker and it's resolved, but then sometimes there's kind of like that awkward tension or feeling in the air. Right? So like, what are some of the strategies or tips that you want to share about how to not make things awkward after something is addressed or resolved?
I think just, you know, always maintaining a positive attitude, never talking about the situation through third party, because sometimes we tend to do that. We confide in our peer or another coworker, and then that's how rumors get started. He said, she said, and that's not nice. And I just think, you know, approaching that person, not with the issue, but maybe going to the person on neutral footing and really offering a recommendation. Maybe they can make a recommendation, or involving that person as far as feedback on a particular project or an idea, will cut the ice, will cut that tension. And then you'll see that the relationship starts to evolve on a more positive level. And then you'll begin to feel better about that person as well.
Great. And then I'll throw out this last question, and it doesn't seem like folks have anything to add, but please, again, encouraging everyone to add if you'd like, but this might be our last question. What would you say when it comes to communication styles? Some people, you know, they do want to address and kind of advocate for themselves and stand up for themselves, but maybe they can do that better in written format versus, you know, speaking to someone straight up. What are your thoughts on, you know, writing an email about how, you know, you made me feel in that meeting or whatever, versus just saying something? Because it all depends on like comfort level too.
Right. And I get, you know, my first thing with that is comfort level comes with experience. But I just think humanity, like, I just think that human to human connection, no email can ever solve. And sometimes I think it's the email that sometimes can cause the biggest problem, because maybe it's not written the right way.
Right.
So first say, be human. You know, go to that person. You know, let the person know based on the person's behavior, not, you know, not anything else, but based on what you've seen, because we want it to be tangible. Explaining yourself that way will bring out that human element. And to me, you can't go wrong with that. That alleviates all kinds of misconceptions and attitudes. the problem consists, then maybe we want to document the things that we continue to see for ourselves, but it might just be the type of thing you might have to document with your supervisor.
Got it. Thank you for that.
No problem.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining today. I hope this was very insightful for you. I know it was for me. Zuleyka, thank you so much for joining us. I know this is as the second one in the series that you've done for us. And
yes, it's wonderful.
Yes, yeah. So again, please everyone look out for the slides and the questionnaire, and we look forward to having you all join us in the next installment of these programs. Thanks everyone. Stay safe, stay well, stay informed, and we'll catch you soon. Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.